Picture this. It's December 2020. The world is still grappling with the chaos of a global pandemic. Businesses are moving online faster than ever. Governments are working remotely, and IT teams are stretched thin trying to secure sprawling networks. Amid all of this, a bombshell drops. Headlines across CNN, Reuters, and the Washington Post scream about a cyber attack of historic proportions. Not one company, not one government agency, but thousands. And the common thread wasn't some shady malware download or phishing email. It was a trusted piece of software used to monitor and manage networks worldwide. SolarWinds Orion. This wasn't your typical breach. It wasn't smash and grab ransomware or a sloppy data leak. No, this was a quiet, methodical infiltration that lasted months, maybe even years. Hackers had found a way to compromise not just a target, but the supply chain itself. They poisoned software updates and turned SolarWinds into a Trojan horse, silently delivering malware to thousands of unsuspecting victims. Imagine updating your antivirus, your firewall, or your monitoring tool and realizing that that very update is the backdoor the hackers needed. That's the SolarWinds supply chain attack. And it wasn't just a technical story. It was a story about trust, power, espionage, and the fragility of the systems our world depends on. To really grasp why SolarWinds was such an attractive target, we need to understand the company and the context. SolarWinds, founded in 1999 in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and later headquartered in Austin, Texas, built its empire on one big promise: make IT simple. Their Orion platform became the gold standard for network monitoring. Administrators could see their entire infrastructure, servers, switches, firewalls, cloud services, through a single pane of glass. Orion was the heartbeat monitor for IT environments. By the late 2010s, SolarWinds wasn't just another vendor. They had over 300,000 customers. That included 425 of the Fortune 500, all 5 branches of the United States military, the Pentagon, the State Department, the Department of Energy, including the National Nuclear Security Administration, even Microsoft, Cisco, Intel, and major telecommunications providers. Orion wasn't niche software, it was critical infrastructure in its own right. Now let's layer in the geopolitical backdrop. For years, Russia's intelligence agencies, particularly the SVR, had been holding their cyber espionage tradecraft. Groups like APT-29, also known as Cozy Bear, had already been linked to the 2016 attacks on the Democratic National Committee. These weren't smash and grab hackers looking for quick profits. They were patient, state-backed operators pursuing long-term intelligence collection. So if you're APT-29, what's your dream target? Not just breaking into one network at a time, that's too slow. You want to compromise a vendor that has trusted access into thousands of networks. Enter SolarWinds, a perfect high-value target. By compromising Orion, they could gain stealthy access to not 1, not 10, but potentially tens of thousands of organizations across the globe. And here's why this matters. In cybersecurity, we talk a lot about the attack surface, all the ways a system can be compromised. But with SolarWinds, attackers didn't need to poke at individual doors and windows. They found the master keymaker, slipped their own keys into the batch, and let the victims install them willingly. The attack redefined what supply chain risk means. Before SolarWinds, many companies worried about physical supply chains, counterfeit hardware, tampered chips, but SolarWinds proved the software supply chain is just as vulnerable, if not more so, because every time you ran an update, you're placing blind trust into the vendor's security, and that trust can be weaponized. The timeline of the SolarWinds attack reads like a slow burn thriller. The story begins in September 2019. Attackers quietly gained access to SolarWinds' internal build systems. We still don't know the exact entry point, possibly stolen credentials, possibly a vulnerability in remote access systems. But however they got in, they didn't rush. They set up persistence mechanisms and spent months exploring. By October 2019, they deployed a tool called Sunspot. Sunspot's job was to monitor Orion's build process. Every time developers compiled a new Orion release, Sunspot would carefully inject malicious code, later named Sunburst, into the legitimate software without disrupting the build. Think about that. The attackers compromised the software at the source invisibly. Fast forward to March 2020, SolarWinds released Orion version 2019.4, and with it, the Sunburst backdoor. Signed with SolarWinds' legitimate digital certificate, the poisoned update looked clean. Between March and June 2020, at least 18,000 customers downloaded and installed the compromised versions. Sunburst was patient. After installation, it would lie dormant for up to 2 weeks, blending into the background. Then it would contact command and control servers disguised with domain names like avsvmcloud.com. Traffic looked like normal Orion Improvement Program communications, so it didn't raise alarms. Throughout summer 2020, attackers quietly leveraged Sunburst to access select targets. Not every one of the 18,000 installations was exploited. Instead, the attackers picked their victims carefully. Government agencies, major tech firms, critical infrastructure providers. On those networks, they deployed second-stage malware like Teardrop and Raindrop, enabling lateral movement, credential theft, and hands-on espionage. For months, this continued undetected. Then, in December 2020, the house of cards began to wobble. On December 8th, cybersecurity firm FireEye disclosed it had been breached. That alone was shocking. FireEye were the hunters, the defenders, the ones usually uncovering nation-state intrusions. But this time, they were the prey. Red team tools, essentially digital lockpicks used to test client security, had been stolen. Within days, FireEye investigators traced their breach back to SolarWinds Orion updates. On December 13th, SolarWinds publicly acknowledged the compromise, and suddenly the scale of the crisis came to the view of the United States Treasury, Department of Commerce, Department of Homeland Security, the Pentagon, Microsoft, Cisco, Intel. It wasn't just one breach, it was thousands, all tied back to Orion. The U.S. government scrambled. CISA issued an emergency directive ordering all federal agencies to disconnect Orion products immediately. Security teams worldwide tore through logs, hunting for signs of compromise. The revelation was earth-shattering. Attackers had been inside networks for months, maybe over a year, and nobody had noticed. Let's get into the mechanics of how this worked step by step. Step 1. Compromise of SolarWinds build environment. The attackers somehow gained administrative access to the systems where Orion was compiled. Sunspot, their custom malware implant, was the linchpin. It hooked into the Microsoft Visual Studio build process and replaced source files with backdoored versions when certain conditions were met. Crucially, it ensured builds wouldn't break, so developers saw nothing unusual. Step 2. Insertion of Sunburst into Orion updates. Sunburst was a backdoor disguised as legitimate Orion code. Once installed on a victim's system, it would collect basic reconnaissance data, hostname, domain, running processes, and send it back to the command server. To avoid detection, it used obfuscated strings, delayed execution, and random jitter in its communication schedule. Step 3. Command and control. Sunburst communicated with domains that looked legitimate and used DNS-based callbacks to blend in. It's encrypted communications and masqueraded as Orion Improvement Program traffic, which many organizations allowed through their firewall. Step 4. Selective exploitation. Out of 18,000 installs, attackers handpicked their high-value targets. On those systems, they deployed additional malware like Teardrop, which used Cobalt Strike Beacon to enable remote control, and Raindrop, which helped spread the infection. These tools gave attackers full command line access, credential theft capability, and the ability to pivot deeper into networks. Step 5. Stealth and persistence. The attackers used stolen SML tokens and forged Active Directory certificates to impersonate legitimate users, including administrators. This allowed them to bypass multi-factor authentication and maintain access invisibly. They used US-based servers for their command and control traffic, making it harder to distinguish malicious traffic from legitimate domestic activity. Step 6. Data exfiltration and espionage. The ultimate goal wasn't ransom or destruction, it was intelligence. Attackers siphoned sensitive emails, classified documents, source code, and strategic data. Microsoft later admitted the attackers viewed portions of their source code repositories. US agencies had to assume critical information had been stolen. What made Sunburst particularly dangerous was its subtlety. Many malware strains are noisy. They trip antivirus alarms, they hog resources, they crash systems. Sunburst was quiet. It used standard APIs, avoided suspicious system calls, and deactivated itself if it detected certain forensic tools. This level of operational security suggested nation-state actors with resources, patience, and discipline. The digital signatures, the careful obfuscation, the staged exploitation, all of it pointed to a level of sophistication far beyond cybercriminal gangs. This was espionage, pure and simple, executed with surgical precision. The fallout was massive and multifaceted. For the US government, it was nothing short of a crisis. Agencies had to disconnect Orion, scrub their networks, and conduct full incident response operations. Sensitive communications were assumed compromised, intelligence operations had to be reevaluated, trust between agencies and their IT systems was shaken. For private sector companies, the breach was equally damaging. Microsoft confirmed that attackers viewed source code for Azure, Exchange, and Intune components. While no customer data was stolen, the fact that adversaries had access to Microsoft's inner workings was alarming. Cisco and Intel also confirmed Orion-related compromises. For SolarWinds itself, the impact was devastating. The company's reputation took a massive hit. Stock prices plummeted by over 40% within days. Lawsuits piled up, alleging negligence in security practices. Congressional hearings dragged executives into the spotlight. Internal whistleblowers revealed lax security practices at SolarWinds, including weak passwords like SolarWinds 123, protecting critical servers. Globally, allies scrambled to assess their exposure. NATO, the European Parliament, and private corporations worldwide raced to check for Orion installations. The sheer scale of the attack highlighted just how interconnected and fragile global IT supply chains had become. Geopolitically, the attack worsened US-Russian tensions. The Biden administration, which took office in January of 2021, formally attributed the attack to Russia's SVR and imposed sanctions in response. The incident underscored how cyber operations had become central tools of statecraft, on par with espionage, diplomacy, and military action. Perhaps most importantly, the attack eroded trust in the software supply chain. Organizations realized that even if their own defenses were strong, a compromised vendor could bring them down. The old model of perimeter defense was no longer enough. The attack sparked a global push towards zero-trust architectures and stricter software integrity checks. So what lessons can we draw from SolarWinds? First, trust is not enough. Just because an update is signed and comes from a trusted vendor doesn't mean it's safe. Organizations need to verify, monitor, and assume compromise, even from trusted sources. Second, software supply chain risk is real. The industry is now moving towards software bills of materials, or SBOMs, which detail every component in a software package. Knowing what's inside your software helps you respond faster when one component is compromised. Third, detection requires visibility. Signature-based antivirus won't catch nation-state malware designed to blend in. Organizations need behavioral analytics, threat hunting, and continuous monitoring to spot subtle anomalies. Fourth, transparency matters. FireEye's decision to disclose its breach quickly and publicly allowed the world to connect the dots back to SolarWinds. Without that transparency, the attackers might have remained undetected even longer. Finally, resilience is the name of the game. It's not about preventing every attack, that's impossible. It's about detecting quickly, responding effectively, and limiting damage. Zero trust, least privilege, strong identity management, and rigorous logging are the foundations of modern resilience. The SolarWinds attack was not the end, it was the beginning of a new era. Supply chain attacks are efficient, scalable, and devastating. Since SolarWinds, we've seen similar compromises like the Kayesa VSA ransomware attack in 2021, and widespread attacks on open source libraries. Governments are responding. In May of 2021, President Biden signed an executive order on improving the nation's cybersecurity, which mandated stronger supply chain security, SBOMs for federal software procurement, and zero trust adoption across agencies. The European Union and other allies have launched similar initiatives. But the attackers won't stop. As organizations harden their defenses, adversaries will look for the weakest link, often a vendor or partner. The future of cybersecurity will require not just defending your own walls, but ensuring the integrity of every tool, library, and partner you rely on. We'll also see new technologies emerge. Blockchain-based code signing, real-time verification of software builds, continuous integrity checks. The SolarWinds attack lit a fire under the industry to innovate in supply chain security. The SolarWinds supply chain attack wasn't just another breach. It was a paradigm shift. It showed that the real battlefield isn't just your network, your firewall, or your email inbox. It's the very supply chain of the software you trust. It taught us that even the most secure organizations can be compromised if their vendors are compromised. It reminded us that in cybersecurity, blind trust is dangerous, and it forced government companies and everyday users to rethink what security really means. So the takeaway is really simple but sobering. The question isn't, could it happen again? The question is, how do we prepare for the day it does? Because as SolarWinds proved, the most dangerous enemy doesn't always break down your door. Sometimes they come bearing an update, and they use the keys you gave them. Stay safe out there, stay aware, and be sure to follow for more content like this.